Okay, Patrick, here we go. It's we're almost go time. We're recording this less than a week before the season starts. We will have a full season preview video for you next week. We've got lots of content coming for you at theprovince.com, vancouversun.com. Sign up to our newsletter if you don't want to make sure that you don't miss a thing. It's right there on the website. But Patrick is preparing a couple of unique pieces for our season preview on the weekend. We also have a full excerpt from Ed Willis's book, Never Boring. Really interesting piece talking to Todd Bertuzzi, Mark Crawford, Brian Burke recently about the whole Todd Bertuzzi situation. So lots of great Canuck stuff that's coming your way at the province of Vancouver Sun along the way. So I'm going to start you off with a banger, Patrick. Is it possible that the Vancouver Canucks legitimately could win the Stanley Cup this year?
Yeah, I mean, anything's possible. Is it likely? No. Without, I think, a clear upgrade on defense. And, Jim Rutherford said it last year, right? Everything has to go for them. Everything has to go right. And look how last year went, right? Like it opened as well as could be hoped for. This was a team that had all, seemed like every other shot went in the other team's net. Obviously had a great performance from Thatcher Demko off the top. Also benefited from an all-time terrible start from the Edmonton Oilers, right? Like, let's not forget about that. The field kind of opened for them, and they did everything right, and they won the division, right? And they had a nice little playoff run, but they knew that there was a lot left on the table. They overcame second half struggles of Elias Pettersson. Overcame some nerve-wracking injuries to Thatcher Demko. They persevered and they proved a lot to themselves, and they built, I think, a bit of a winning culture. But now it's a new year, and they would like to build off all of that. They once again have question marks about Demko. They have question marks about Pettersson, and their defense, I don't think right now is as good as it was last year. So. And the Oilers are far more confident, I think, than they were certainly going into last year, and certainly than where they stood at Christmas. So you look how tough the division is. You look at the challenges the Canucks face on their own, and so that's why I say it's unlikely. But listen, they pull it together. They certainly, I think they have a better forward group, more complete forward group than last year, and certainly have, I think. Even if Demko's injured, and it sounds weird to say, they actually have a bit of a more settled situation in goal. They've got an experienced backup in Kevin Lankinen and Artur Shilovs. It sounds like they're going to try to go for the three-headed monster to start the season anyway. Artur Shilovs showed enough in the playoffs that there's still potential there. The Canucks are obviously hopeful he can figure out the last sort of bits of his game, stopping long shots. There's lots of interesting, good little promising things, but like I said, there's also a lot of questions. So you cannot say for sure that they are a out and out Stanley Cup contender, let alone favorite.
So I would counter that by saying they overcame a lot of things. You can also, I mean, injuries are just, whether it's good luck, bad luck.
Mm-hmm.
Some teams have to deal with them, other teams don't, depending on the year. You can make the argument that if Demko doesn't get hurt, and Elias Pettersson isn't terrible in the playoffs, or maybe that's unfair, but at least if he's more productive in the playoffs, that they get by the Oilers, and then, there's odds-on chance that they could at least be in the final at that point. So let me ask you this then. Are the Canucks better than they were last year? You said defensively they weren't, because I look at the Oilers, and of course, whenever you have Draisaitl McDavid, you're always going to be a contender. But if the Oilers are the big bad bogeyman of the Pacific or of the West, I think you can make the argument that, can Skinner be like that again? Their defense has always been a question mark. If you could solve the Oilers, or if you can solve your own penalty kill, I don't think that matchup is necessarily as tricky as people. Well, it's always going to be tricky, but I don't know that it's insurmountable. So are they, are you sound fairly pessimistic now? Maybe this is the start of the season, but are they a better team? compared to last year?
Well, yeah, first of all, shout out to the reader who called me out, our viewer, in our last week's episode, saying I'm just being so, yeah, essentially so negative, and look at this, and they're
You're
blah 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 blah.
conditioned.
Yeah. um, but yeah, if I'm asked to pick a question mark for this team, I think most people would go with goalie. But my real question is this defense core. I mean, Quinn Hughes was incredible last year. Can he repeat that? Think about try to. It's funny to think about, but try to imagine he hadn't been as good last year. How would we feel about the defense, the team's overall defense? He is an elite defenseman. That's great, and so the expectation is he will be just as good this year, and that's really good for the Canucks. Phil Pronek, when he was healthy, was a really useful blue liner, great partner for Hughes. The Canucks, I think, still would dream of him finding his own defense pair, but right now, I think there's every reason to think they're going to be the partnership at the top. Soucy and Myers, yeah, they were good last. I mean, especially Soucy. I was pleasantly surprised. I think most of us were surprised at how effective Carson Soucy proved to be. So that's a good story. I think it's reasonable to think that he's still going to be this handy, surprisingly useful two-way defenseman, not just a guy who's good at killing penalties and shutting down things in his own end. Myers was a renaissance man last year. Like, he finally found a role that suited him. He played as little as he's ever played in his career, and he was highly effective in those minutes. And so can he carry on with the success he had last year? The number of times people kind of got frustrated with a Tyler Myers brain fart were minimal last year. That was notable. It had not been the case, especially in all the previous couple seasons. He really found himself in this system, this defense-first system that Rick Tocchet wants from his team. But Derek Forbort and Vinny Desharnais are total X factors. We have seen them only play for other teams, and Desharnais struggled often with the Oilers last year. Now, it did depend on whether he was playing with Darnell Nurse or not. Obviously, he's not playing with Darnell Nurse now. So is that enough? He's a big guy. We know why he's there. He's a giant defenseman, and Rick Tocchet likes giant defensemen, but he is not Nikita Zadorov. Now, Nikita Zadorov wasn't a perfect defenseman, but we certainly got a sense of what he was like at his best in the playoffs. He's gone. Derek Forbort's not Nikita Zadorov. He's been a sort of a long-standing, totally capable depth defenseman. And I think if you're the Canucks, you would rather have him as your number 7 guy, not as your number 6 guy, which is what he's lined up as right now. But he's there, and there's a lot of pressure on him to be able to play in this game, this system that demands a lot of players, that has them on their toes, ready to move the puck, has to be able to move the puck. And obviously the Canucks think these two guys can manage it, otherwise they wouldn't have signed them. So I hope I'm wrong. I hope that my skepticism is unwarranted. But that is, to me, the biggest question mark in all this. The Canucks, I think, have found a better balance on their forward lines. I don't think they will struggle to score as they did down the stretch and into the playoffs last year. Rick Tocchet certainly has talked a lot about understanding how much his team needs to be better on the rush. It was something they struggled at last year. But once again, it's all about what you're doing with the puck as much as and the Canucks want to play with the puck and not without the puck. And now it's about whether their defense core, which, like I said, features 1/3 of new players, can adapt to that reality.
That's all fair enough. I suppose if you were glass half full, you no, you might say that when you look at really what this team is built around,
yeah,
those players should still be in their ascendancy. Like, it's a great question. Can Quinn Hughes defend his Norris Trophy? But he's in the ascendancy. He's in that window where he should be getting better year on year. I'd still put Pettersson in that category. We're not talking about drop-offs from Besser or Miller or guys like that yet. So what they have, their so-called core, provided they're healthy, you would hope that experience, in particular playoff experience, winning around, is going to make the team better before they get there. I think it's fair, though, to question, like, how do these new pieces fit? And that's where this offseason's been rather fascinating for them. Let's talk a little bit about Besser. Hasn't been a lot of that I've seen, a lot of analysis around him, and a lot of it's wait and see. Obviously, at the very end of the Canucks playoff run, there was the health issue there. He's talked about that a little bit, in particular right when training camp got started, but any concerns there? What kind of a season do you expect from Brock Besser? Because he was a guy this time last year,
Yeah.
they were looking at Connor Garland, Brock Besser. They're probably not going to be here long
Yeah.
term. Pieces who want out, and then they almost became foundational players for them.
Yeah. And listen, Besser scored 40, could he have scored 50? He certainly would like to score 50. I mean, there's a guy who has everything going for him. He's had a great season. He's in the last year of a contract. He's playing with a great center, a guy that he plays really well with. Him and JT Miller finally finding an effective partnership last year was a truly bizarrely under discussed story last year. Maybe because they were both having such successful seasons, it was just sort of implied that they were a fantastic duo, and so much of the season leans on them being fantastic again. I don't know if Besser's going to score 40 goals again, but he should score 30, and the expectation is that he should score 35. Like, he should be in that range. Can JT Miller score 100 points again? I mean, 2 of the last 3 seasons, he's been in that range, so the expectation is there. We know at some point Miller is going to start facing the reality of being in his 30s. I don't think we're there yet. Obviously, he is taking his time this preseason to get into action. I suppose dealing with something minor. I don't know. I mean, if it was the regular season, I'm pretty sure he'd play. He's talked to the media basically every day. He's been skating in practice. Like, whatever it is that's been bothering him has been very, very, very minor. And mostly he just doesn't like preseason. He just doesn't want it. I get it. So, but yeah, there should be lots of attention on those two. They really, in many ways, Miller, obviously the emotional heart of this team now. A guy who really has found his way to be who he wants to be, and I think clearly has made it a much more effective leadership tool than he ever has before. Like, he will admit when he was young and dumb, and he yelled too much, and he annoyed people, and it was hard for, no one wanted to rally around him. He's gotten old and wise, as we know, and it gets, you either get worse at that or you get better at that. And he's found a happy medium, which clearly there's an energy there. There's enough foils, I think. He and I were kind of joking around about this, about how it goes. He insists he's not on social media, doesn't look at whatever, just gets stuff sent to him. And I said, well, is it Connor Garland that winds you up the most? And he goes, well, he's one of them. But there's a willingness to rub him a little bit, bug him a little bit, poke him, needle him, keep him on his toes just as much as he's going to be rah, let's go, because that's all he knows. And the Canucks have found a happy medium. It works. And it's a big year for both of them. I mean, Miller wants to be the guy, right? He wants the credit. That drives him. And he is a hard worker. He's a passionate worker. Every other player on this team, you talk to people around the team and they say, listen, I had someone say this to me the other day. He said, if guys, he's like, I think they see how hard he works. If they can find a way to mimic that themselves, they'll be a lot way closer to the Stanley Cup team they want to be.
The starts for this team over the last 4 or 5 years have been fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're not talking about win 2, lose 1, win 3, lose 3. It's been one way or the other. Like, terrible starts have sunk the season before it even began. And last year, like, just on fire, really set up the season, raised the expectations,
right?
Confidence flowing. The start of the season, we'll get into it a little bit more next week once the games start going. But you look at 4 of the, I know they've got the 2 home games and then they're on the road. 4 of the first 6 games, Flyers twice, Blackhawks, Flames, and then the 2 Florida teams, defending champs in Miami and in Sunrise and
Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, and then the Lightning in there as well. But that's a pretty kind start to the season, and you'll hear coaches talk about how they actually like a little bit more of a longer road trip to start the season, set the team in, galvanize them, everything else. Are you expecting another fast start?
I mean, they came out, let's be clear. Right out of the gate, they didn't have a fast start last year. Let's not forget that their first couple of games on the road were terrible, and Rick Tocchet ripped his team for them, right? They quickly found their way, and they had
Yeah,
some.
I'm speaking generally like
I,
first
no,
two
I
months
understand
type
what you're
thing.
saying. I'm just saying in the first handful of games, it took the Canucks a while to get their feet moving. And I mean, they obviously had the spectacular opening night win over Edmonton, and then beat kind of rope-a-doped Edmonton in Game 2 in Edmonton, and then stumbled their way through the first half of their road trip. But still, they, we do. How are they going to do in the first, over the next week? And they certainly early on outpaced our predictions and found their way to an incredibly strong record. And a lot of that was about swagger, a lot of those confidence, a lot of that was, yes, a lot of that was about some luck with shooting, especially. Um, there was this sort of early stages of the system that worked so well for them down the stretch last year, and that they will be much more attuned to this year. So, to go back to your original first question off the top, if you really want to counter what I'm saying, you can point to the fact that these guys already know the system they're playing. Like they're going to only be better at it, and they're only going to understand it more and understand where the sort of the advantages they can build out of it are. And yeah, that if they do that right, they could get off to an incredibly hot start once again, because quite simply they're not giving up any goals, and that's the most important thing in the NHL.
One of the real weird things of last season, and you've done a couple of stories on this, the schedule has been fascinating, especially
Yeah,
since Jim Rutherford's been there, seems to perhaps have someone's ear in terms of what's desired for their team. But
he tries to
last year,
tamp that idea down, Paul. But
no, I know he
I
does, but
think
I'm just
no, but I think you're absolutely right.
I'm going off like decades
Yeah,
and decades of
yeah,
whoever the GM happened to be here whining about,
yes,
we were in 12 different time zones over the last 3 days, and like, okay, when you fly
yeah,
to
yeah,
whatever. But it's been pretty kind to them the last couple of years. But it's just last year, one of the vagaries of the schedule was they had all these early games against the Oilers and then didn't play them until right at the end.
yeah. That's right.
I just think this is fantastic because we can manufacture your Chicago's or go back to
Right.
Boston, and there's lingering feelings there for the fans. But, do you think JT Miller really gives a shit about the Canucks playing the Bruins like what happened in 2011?
No,
I,
absolutely.
I don't know, but we actually have a rivalry now.
Yeah,
And the same thing,
yeah,
fans geographically and fans, Luke Gazdick, whatever, that, the first month of the season, we don't see the Oilers.
yeah.
Saturday, November 9th will be the Remembrance Day long weekend, as Remembrance
Right.
Day falls on a Monday. Man, I'm looking forward to that game already.
Yeah,
It's going to be fun to have a real traditional rivalry where you see the players don't like each other. There's true competition. There's real energy in the stands. That's just one of the reasons I think this season is going to be a lot more fun than we've had here around it here in a long time.
yeah. Absolutely, and the fact that there is some things to look forward to, like we just didn't have that last year. Was, can Rick Tocchet make this team better than it should? Or make it as good as we think the talent is, and he made it better. Right, like he won the Jack Adams, and everyone was impressed. And they were, at the end of the regular season, they had been one of the best regular season teams in the NHL. Sure, they'd fallen away a little bit at the end, but they were so consistent. You look quarter by quarter, and the amount of points they put up was pretty steady. Um, and I think Canucks fans were impressed, right? Like it'd been a long time since we had enjoyed playoff hockey here. The buzz was back. I mean, I think back to that. Post game. Was it? I'm trying to remember what game would have been. Game must have been game 5. Anyway, I'm leaving the arena, and there's all the fans outside chanting about Shelovs. It was kind of amazing. And
You sure it wasn't Ball Arena when you were walking out and you met a bunch of opposition fans for the Avalanche and they were nervous about the Canucks sneaking in and playing in the playoffs? It wasn't that game?
no, it wasn't that game at all.
Okay.
No, it was
That's
just
for Mike
amazing.
Martinego, but he's
I
not
know
going to
it's
listen.
great.
He's not
It's
going
great.
to watch this.
It's great. He's absolutely not watching this. So, no, but just stay there. And there was a fan energy outside that just we hadn't felt in a really long time. And fans want that. That's what they want back. And certainly the hockey operations group recognizes, obviously they want to win, but they also want to entertain. and they feel that energy. And so yeah, playing against the Oilers. I mean, the buildup. Yeah, like you said, we've got a month until we see the Oilers. I mean, the buildup is going to be phenomenal, no matter what the situation is for both either team in the standings, in the narrative, what have you. That game is going to mean a lot to both teams, and it should be a thriller.
Great stuff, Patrick. I will remind everyone, read Patrick's content, go to theprovince.com or thevancouversun.com, depending on the flavor you prefer. And all his stuff is available there. Follow him on social. We got some fun stuff planned for you this season, regular features, including a new one where we're going to highlight a different alumni player every week, get them to tell some great tales along the way. We're also Patrick's mailbag is back, so we're going to be looking to interact with you. You can certainly leave questions under the video, whether it's on the website or on our YouTube channel. We definitely appreciate our viewers there. So thanks for watching, everyone. It's going to be a fun season. We'll be back at you next week because we are going to do these every week, Patrick.
I'm holding you to it, Paul.
All right. Have a good week, everyone.